Welcome back to The Real News. I'm continuing my conversation with environmental activist and Emmy Award and Oscar-nominated filmmaker Josh Fox. He's known for his films like Gasland and Awake, A Dream from Standing Rock, and his new book and one-man show is called The Truth Has Changed. Thanks for coming back, Josh.
Oh, it's great to be back.
So in this book, you write about the global nature of the fossil fuel industry. For example, the dominant narrative says Russians interfered with the 2016 election. But you unpack that narrative. You show that state-owned oil company Rosneft has fracking operations in the U.S. It bought those from ExxonMobil. ExxonMobil had a partnership with Rosneft to do offshore drilling in the Russian Arctic. Now that partnership has ended and been passed on to BP. How does the global nature of the fossil fuel industry sort of impact how we have to fight against it?
Well, I think if we were trying to prove collusion between Donald Trump and the Republican Party and the oil industry, you'd have a very easy time of that. I think the problem is that that's not illegal.
Right.
And, you know, it's perfectly legal for ExxonMobil to tamper in our elections. It's perfectly illegal for ExxonMobil to tamper with the climate. In fact, it's perfectly legal for ExxonMobil to end the world. And that is a big problem. In fact, most of the things that happened during the Holocaust, according to German law, were perfectly legal. So legality is not always the best judge of what morality is. And certainly when we focused our attention on the Russian collusion aspect, and this is had to be something that was provable, you know, we came up with a variety of different results. But if we had spent time on the left, I think, obsessing about Donald Trump's connections to the oil industry, I think we would have gotten a lot further along the line. I think that we really have to examine how all of those things are connected, right? Russian oligarchs and Putin are like this. So he has a relationship with his oil companies that is very similar to the relationship that Donald Trump has with the oil industry, which is to completely strip all regulations, and have that sort of deal where the government and the oil industry are basically the same thing. And I would say that that's what's happening right now. It's never been more true, the George Carlin joke, America is an oil company with an army. That's what we're seeing right now, and that's extraordinarily dangerous and difficult. And you're seeing the oil industry employ ever more militaristic and rapacious tactics in trying to push back the protests and trying to disparage the case for climate change, which is obvious to everybody that that's actually happening now. It's very, very real, and it is an existential threat to the planet. So I would suggest that the opposition also has to be international, and we've seen this with the fracking movement. The anti-fracking movement exploded all across the world and has been responsible for keeping an enormous amount of carbon in the ground. We have banned fracking in the majority of countries in Europe. That is an enormous climate impact. We have banned fracking throughout the entire state of New York and Vermont, and I believe Maryland.
Yeah.
There and many other counties and municipalities. That has kept an enormous amount of carbon and methane in the ground.
There's a lot of debate now about how to sort of make climate policy more intersectional. The Green New Deal has really taken this on. And like the anti-fracking movement, which you've been obviously very involved in for about 10 years, it's captured the attention of lots of young people and has united lots of grassroots groups. How far has that climate conversation come in terms of that sort of intersectionality? And do you think that there's enough conversation in that movement about things like natural gas power plant build out and fracking and LNG and some of the things that you pushed to include?
I was just speaking with some of the people at New Consensus who are writing that Green New Deal legislation, and I was imploring them to make sure that they included fossil fuel infrastructure. The Bernie Sanders campaign, full disclosure, I am a surrogate for the Bernie Sanders campaign, just included a part of their policy saying no new fossil fuel infrastructure, no new frack gas power plants, no new pipelines, no new compressor stations, no new LNG terminals. That is absolutely essential, right? That has to be a part of the Green New Deal. They assured me that it was part of the conversations. I want to see it written into the bill. So that's a conversation that's ongoing. But there is absolutely no question that what has happened with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Green New Deal, the conversation has changed in an incredibly amazing and wonderful and brilliant way. We are now talking about climate change as an issue of race. We are talking about climate change as an issue of economics. We are talking about climate change in terms of the kind of intersectionality that we haven't seen. And on this Earth Day, I think we really have to celebrate the fact that we are not seeing this issue of the environment, the issue of climate, as an issue of privilege, as an issue that only white environmentalists are talking about. We're seeing this as an extension, climate change, of white supremacy. We are seeing this as an extension of late model capitalism. We are seeing this as an extension of economic inequality, racial inequality. These are the things that we absolutely must speak about when we're talking about this. In terms of the legislation. And as the child of immigrants, I think we also have to speak about this issue as an issue fundamentally tied to immigration and to the border. We have to see these things through an international lens, through an intersectional lens, and I think that it is an incredibly welcome, new wave in this dialogue that the Green New Deal, that the Sunrise Movement, that climate mobilization, that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that all these incredible women of color who have just come in like gangbusters into the House of Representatives has changed America in a wonderful way, and we have to welcome that.
I have to ask, in your book and in your work, you've been quite critical of Jill Stein and the Green Party, but some people have pointed to them as sort of early adopters of the Green New Deal. And I mean, the first time I think I ever heard the term the Green New Deal was from Stein in like 2013. Could you talk a little bit about where that critique comes from and why you're more willing to champion the Green New Deal of today's Sunrise Movement and AOC?
If Jill Stein was running for Congress, I would support her. That's not the point. I don't have a problem with their policies. I think their policies have always been pretty spot on. I have a problem with their tactics. I have a problem with the fact that they have absolutely no strategy. I mean, you can't win a presidential election. I'm sorry, the Green Party is not equipped or organized to do anything but become a spoiler in a presidential election. And it's happened now twice in a row, helping tilt electoral college, in the favor of the Republicans. Like, I am also a fan of Ralph Nader's policies. That's not my point. My point is that these are, as an activist and as a filmmaker, but also as a person who just cares about getting things done, this is terrible strategy. That's my main issue with the Green Party. And I confronted them. I said, are you running a presidential campaign, or what are you doing? And they said, oh, we're running for president. I said, well, you're not trying to win. What are you trying to do? They said, well, we're trying to get 5%. Now, these were back channel conversations. These were not the things that they were saying to the public. And that was a problem that I had. If you're coming out and saying, well, we just want to win 5%, then great, say that. But don't come out and say that Al Gore and George Bush are the same person. Don't come out and say that Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are the same person, because that's just absolutely patently absurd. It's not true. And if we had ranked choice voting in this country, I would say, fine, we'll vote for the Green Party. If your second choice are the Democrats, then obviously if somebody doesn't have a majority, it moves over. The equivalent of ranked choice voting, which the Green Party supports, is you drop out in swing states, so you don't play spoiler.
I hear you, but I guess the sort of obvious counter to that is, 9% of Democrats voted for Trump. That's more of a percentage of the vote than Stein even got. Of course, Stein sort of spearheaded that push for a recount in the 2016 election.
Right, which didn't actually get followed through on. But what I would say is that and a lot of friends of mine who would be contributing to movements in other ways contributed to that effort. What I guess I would say is that, for my money and for my voice, I would like to make sure that the people who are affected by what I have to say in terms of reporting on fracking, reporting on the climate, if I can influence anyone, I would say, do not go down that road. We are trying really hard, whether the progress is incremental or the progress is revolutionary. What would I believe we offered to the American people in 2016 was incremental progress and political revolution at the same time, when you had Bernie and Hillary come together. Rather than just throwing in the towel and saying this whole conversation is corrupt. The conversation is corrupt, but we change it by actually getting involved with it. That's what I believe. So if, from my point of view, I would say to people who were vehemently anti-fracking, who were single-issue voters, who are moving towards Jill Stein, please don't do that. You're undoing a lot of the good work that we are trying to achieve here.
And could you talk for you about what the role is of these sort of artistic endeavors, filmmaking project, these creative endeavors in moving that climate conversation forward, in pushing what's possible in terms of climate policy?
Well, I mean, we have to imagine a better world, right? And we have to imagine a future. We're making a new episodic series on climate change that's coming out of the themes from The Truth Has Changed. And we are trying to see a beautiful future that climate change makes us encounter rather than the constant feeling that the future is going to be awful, right? And one way I would like to say is that, America closes the restaurants at 8 and the bars at 1. We have like Walmarts and all these corporate experiences everywhere, which aren't a place to have a deep conversation about anything. What about 200 million new people from other places that could make this place amazing? What if we New Yorkified the rest of the country? Now that makes some people horrified, but I would like to dream about learning Guatemalan dances and how many Guatemalan restaurants are there in Wyoming? And wouldn't that be incredible?
Yeah, not
Couldn't
that
we
many here either.
couldn't we find a way to encourage our values, our innovation, our diversity, our cultures, our generosity, our communities, our courage? Why couldn't the climate crisis inspire us to new heights to be better human beings? I think that's an artistic endeavor. I think that's a poetic endeavor. I think that's an imaginative endeavor. So we're seeing, we're seeing that future. We're seeing different outcomes. We're trying to portray that. Because I truly think that ingenuity and innovation is not just something that happens in a technological space, it's something that happens in a philosophical space. It's something that happens in a values sense. So we can have innovation in terms of values. We can have innovation in terms of our intellectual capacity. We have to challenge ourselves to go there, just as we have to challenge ourselves to make solar panels and make wind turbines. We have to have the moral imagination, and I think that's a place for artists, for philosophers, for poets, for people who are crazy, madmen. That we have to go those places to see where we are headed, and I think that's a lot where. I mean, look, we're artists first and foremost as filmmakers, so we have to tell a good story. We have to thrill people. We have to engage our compassion and empathy. And so that's how I approach it. And I think that what we're trying to do with the climate crisis is to not just portray the complete horror and terror of like a category 5 hurricane come bearing down your doorstep, but also what human ingenuity, imagination, love, respect, all of these incredible virtues that we have, those are the things that climate change can't destroy inside of us. We destroy them, but climate change could inspire them. So why don't we do that, and why don't we see that?
Well, thank you so much, Josh. And as you continue on these endeavors, as we see when this new book of yours is made into a film and a series, please keep us posted. We'd love to talk to you again.
I really appreciate the conversation. Thanks so much, and we will.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.